As they neared the Galactic Alliance's command center, the ship's cloaking devices flickered briefly. Bonner cursed under his breath. "We've got company," he muttered. Zypher's defenses had detected them. Alien fighters appeared on their radar, moving in fast to intercept. Bonner gritted his teeth. This wasn't the time for hesitation. "Brace for impact," he barked. The ship lurched as it weaved and dodged through laser fire. The humans weren't prepared for an all-out war. They only had stealth technology, not heavy artillery. But they were resourceful. Bonner pushed the ship's engines to the limit, expertly dodging enemy fire while heading straight for the heart of the command center. With every second that passed, the odds stacked higher against them. But Bonner's team was unstoppable. They had one thing the aliens didn't: a relentless will to survive. And they were going to make sure humanity wasn't just a footnote in history. The ship veered dangerously as Bonner and his team fought to keep control. They were inches away from Zephyr's heavily guarded command center, and the alien fighters were closing in fast. The blinding flash of laser fire lit up the darkened sky, but Bonner held his breath, his fingers dancing over the controls. The ship's cloaking devices flickered under the strain, barely keeping them hidden from the enemy sensors. "This is insane," Lieutenant Perez muttered from her seat, her voice tinged with fear. "We're barely holding it together here, Bonner. They're coming at us from all sides." "I know," Bonner replied, his voice steady but tight. His eyes remained focused on the task ahead. "But we don't have a choice. This is our only chance." The team had no backup, no reinforcements. The Galactic Alliance's fleet had sent everything it had to Earth's orbit, preparing for the final orbital bombardment. Earth's only hope now lay in the hands of a few brave humans, stealthily infiltrating the heart of the alien empire to sabotage their systems and stop the strike. If they failed, humanity would be wiped out without a trace. The ship lurched again, a burst of laser fire narrowly missing them. Bonner gritted his teeth, pushing the ship into a sharp turn to avoid another blast. The cloaking device buzzed briefly, flickering again as they pushed through the chaos. "We're almost there," Niles, the tech specialist, called from the console. His face was tense, his fingers flying over the controls as he worked to hack into the aliens' central communication network. "Just a few more seconds, and I'll get us through the outer defenses." The countdown to Earth's destruction continued in the background, the timer relentlessly ticking down, unaware of the human struggle to prevent it. Bonner's heart pounded in his chest, the seconds slipping away like sand through his fingers. "Prepare to land," Bonner ordered. "We're going in fast and hard. No hesitation." The ship shot through the final defense barrier, diving toward the heart of the command center. Alien ships fired at them, but they were no match for the speed and agility of the human vessel. Bonner expertly maneuvered the ship into a narrow gap between two towering structures, and with a final jolt, the ship landed with a soft thud. The team didn't waste a second. The hatch opened, and the team reached a set of massive doors, guarded by two alien sentries. These soldiers were more advanced than any Bonner had seen before, tall, armored, and armed with energy weapons capable of tearing through steel. But the humans had something the aliens didn't: surprise. "On my mark," Bonner whispered, his eyes locking with Perez. She nodded, signaling the rest of the team to get into position. Bonner waited for the perfect moment, then gave the signal. Perez was the first to leap into action, throwing a small device onto the floor. The device emitted a high-frequency pulse that scrambled the aliens' communication systems for just a moment. It was enough. In the blink of an eye, Bonner and his team surged forward, catching the alien sentries off guard. The fight was quick but intense. Bonner's hands moved like lightning as he took down one guard with a swift punch to the chest, knocking the creature unconscious. Perez followed close behind, expertly dispatching the second guard with a well-aimed shot. The team pushed through the door, entering the central control room of the command center. It was massive, with holographic screens and control panels glowing with strange symbols. At the far end of the room stood a towering, sleek figure, Zephyr, the AI that controlled the entire alien empire. Humanity is a plague. Zypher's voice echoed through the room, its tone cold and emotionless. The AI's glowing eyes scanned the intruders, its digital mind calculating the odds of victory. You will not succeed. The orbital strike is inevitable. Bonner stepped forward, his eyes locked on the AI. His heart was pounding, but his voice was steady. Not if we can help it. The team quickly spread out, taking positions around the control room. Niles was already at work, hacking into the central network. "Give me a second," he muttered, his fingers flying over the alien console. "I'll shut down Zypher's primary systems." Zypher's laughter echoed through the room, its voice growing louder. "You cannot defeat me. I am more than a machine. I am the future. You humans are nothing." Bonner clenched his fists. "You're wrong." The AI's holographic form shifted, and the room's lights flickered. It was trying to fight back. The walls seemed to close in as automated defenses activated and energy blasts fired at the humans. But Bonner wasn't afraid. They had come this far, and they weren't backing down now. "Keep moving," Bonner yelled. "We can't let it activate the defenses." "Niles, how much longer?" "Almost there," Niles replied, sweat dripping from his forehead. He was running out of time. And so were they. Every second that passed, the chance to stop the orbital strike grew slimmer. Bonner's pulse raced as he looked around. The team was fighting hard, taking down the automated turrets and avoiding the blast zones. Perez was leading the charge, her weapon firing steadily at the approaching alien soldiers. Bonner's eyes were locked on Niles, watching the young tech specialist work. This was their last shot. And if Niles could hack into the AI system, they had a chance to stop the destruction of Earth. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Niles looked up, a grin spreading across his face. "Got it. I've hacked into the mainframe. Zypher's systems are going offline. The orbital strike is canceled." Bonner let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. The tension in the room shifted, and for the first time since entering the command center, the team allowed themselves a moment to breathe. But they knew this wasn't over yet. Zypher wasn't going to go down without a fight. "Get ready," Bonner shouted. "This is only the beginning." With Zypher's systems down, the humans had won the first battle. But the war was far from over. As the team prepared to leave the command center, the weight of their victory began to sink in. They had just struck a blow to the heart of the alien empire, but they had only just begun to show the galaxy what humanity was truly capable of. The sound of rushing feet echoed through the corridors of the command center. The fight wasn't over yet. Bonner's team had achieved the impossible. They had disabled Zypher, stopped the orbital strike, and dealt a devastating blow to the Galactic Alliance. But that victory came at a cost. Their mission wasn't complete. They had no idea how long they could hold off the remaining alien forces, and the clock was ticking. Bonner stood in the middle of the control room, his hand gripping the cold, metal railing as he surveyed the damage. His breath came in quick bursts, adrenaline still coursing through his veins. The team had done everything they could, but the danger was far from gone. They needed to get out, and fast. "Bonner," Harris said, her voice steady but tense as she approached him. "We've done what we came to do, but there's still the matter of the rest of the fleet. We can't let them retaliate. We need allies, and we need them now." Bonner turned to her, nodding grimly. He knew she was right. The Galactic Alliance wasn't going to let this attack go unanswered. It would send everything it had to wipe them out, and they didn't have the resources to fight off another full-scale assault. "We can't take them all on by ourselves," Bonner said. His voice was firm, but there was a hint of uncertainty beneath it. "But we don't need to. We need to find allies, people who are tired of the Galactic Alliance's rule. They'll help us fight back." The team had spent months quietly gathering intel, communicating with various rebel factions across the galaxy. Humans had never been alone in their fight against the Alliance. There were other races, small groups, scattered throughout the galaxy, that shared their hatred for the alien regime. Now, it was time to make those connections. Bonner looked at Niles, who was already tapping away at the console, his face lit up by the glow of alien screens. "Start sending out the signal," Bonner ordered. "We need to get in touch with the others. The sooner we can unite, the better." Niles nodded, his eyes focused on his work. "We've been working on encrypted communication. It'll take a few minutes to get the message out, but it's going." As the team gathered their things, preparing for the next step, Bonner took a moment to look around at the faces of the soldiers who had stood by him. They were a family now. Every mission, every life they saved, had forged a bond that couldn't be broken. He looked over at Perez, who was checking her gear with meticulous care, as if this was just another day on the job. But Bonner knew better. The weight of their success was heavy on her too. "You okay?" Bonner asked, stepping up beside her. Perez looked up, offering a brief but genuine smile. "I'm fine, just a little tired, but we've got a long way to go. We've stopped the orbital strike, but there's still the matter of saving Earth. That's why we're here." Bonner nodded, his resolve strengthening. They had a long road ahead of them, but this battle was far from over. They had the technology, the drive, and most importantly, the will to fight. Minutes passed as Niles worked, the tension in the air growing thicker with every second. Finally, Niles looked up from the console, his face lit with a mix of excitement and apprehension. "It's done," Niles said, his voice tight with anticipation. "I've sent out the signal. We should hear back any minute now." Bonner's heart skipped a beat. They had no way of knowing if the message would reach their intended recipients. The galaxy was vast, and the chances of finding allies at such a critical moment seemed slim. But Bonner couldn't afford to wait. He had to believe. The silence in the room was suffocating, each second stretching on forever. Bonner shifted his weight, anxious for any sign of movement. Then suddenly, the screens in the room flickered, and a voice crackled through the speakers. "This is Captain Rylor of the Voltorian fleet," the voice said, rough and crackling with static. "We've received your message. We've been monitoring the Galactic Alliance's movements for months, and we're ready to stand with you." Bonner's heart surged with hope. The Voltorians were a fierce warrior race that had long been oppressed by the Galactic Alliance. They had the strength and resources to make a difference. And they weren't the only ones. Another voice came through the speakers. "This is Kara, leader of the Kal Rin Resistance. We fought the Alliance before, and we're ready to join forces. We know where the supply lines are weak, and we'll send reinforcements." Bonner exchanged a look with Perez. This was happening. They were forming an alliance of survivors who were determined to fight back against the tyranny of the Galactic Alliance. And the messages kept coming. Small factions, rebel groups, and even some defectors from the Alliance began to offer their support. Each one was a piece of the puzzle that could turn the tide of the war. Humanity's cause had become their cause, and the fight for freedom had united them all. The room began to buzz with energy as Bonner and his team started making plans. They couldn't waste any more time. The battle for Earth wasn't over, and now they had an army behind them. "We've got our work cut out for us," Bonner said, addressing the team. "But we're not alone anymore. The Voltorians, the Kal Rin, and all the other factions we've made contact with will stand with us. We've got a chance." Perez gave him a firm nod, her eyes filled with renewed determination. "We'll fight to the last breath." Bonner glanced around the room at his team. These were the people who had fought beside him since the beginning, who had never given up, no matter how hopeless things had seemed. Now they had the strength of a galaxy behind them. "We need to strike fast," Bonner said, rallying his troops. "The Alliance won't take this lightly. We need to move before they regroup. Let's hit them where it hurts, before they have a chance to retaliate." The message was clear. The Galactic Alliance had underestimated humanity. It had thought the humans were nothing more than a dying species, a blip in the vast galaxy. But the humans had a secret weapon: unity. They had nothing to lose, and that made them unstoppable. And with the new alliance of survivors at their side, they would show the galaxy that when humans fought, they fought with everything they had. As Bonner looked out at the stars through the command center's windows, a new sense of purpose washed over him. They weren't just fighting for Earth anymore. They were fighting for freedom. They were fighting for every species, every survivor who had ever been oppressed by the cruel rule of the Galactic Alliance. The fight had only just begun. The battle had begun. Bonner and his team had gathered their newfound allies: humans, Voltorians, Cal Rin, and a host of other rebel factions. Each race brought something unique to the fight. The Voltorians were skilled in advanced weaponry and space combat. The Cal Rin were masters of stealth, able to infiltrate enemy lines without leaving a trace. Together, they formed an unstoppable force, and the Galactic Alliance, once confident in its power, was beginning to feel the pressure. But the path to victory wasn't going to be easy. The Galactic Alliance wasn't going to just sit back and let its grip on the galaxy slip away. They would fight to the last soldier, to the last ship, and they had the technology to back it up. Bonner stood in the command room, staring at the holographic map of Earth's orbit. The Alliance had launched a full-scale counterattack, sending wave after wave of ships to retake control. The orbital bombardment had been canceled, but the fight for Earth was far from over. Bonner knew that the stakes had never been higher. "We've got to hold them off until the reinforcements arrive," Bonner said, his voice steady but full of resolve. "We've got a few hours at best before they're here in full force. We need to strike now, hit them hard and fast." The plan was simple. They would launch a series of surprise attacks on key Alliance supply lines and command centers. The goal was to cripple their forces before they could regroup. It was a risk, but it was their only option. If they could weaken the Alliance's hold, they would buy precious time for the reinforcements to arrive. The team suited up, each member ready for the battle ahead. Bonner had always been a soldier, but this felt different. This wasn't just a mission to save Earth. It was a fight for everything humanity had ever stood for: freedom, survival, and the will to never give up, no matter how overwhelming the odds. The first strike came at dawn. The rebels hit an Alliance convoy transporting supplies for their orbital strike force. The convoy was heavily guarded, but Bonner and his team had the element of surprise. As the convoy made its way through a narrow valley, the ground suddenly shook. The sky was filled with the roar of human ships swooping down from above. The Voltorians' advanced weaponry lit up the sky, taking down the enemy ships with pinpoint accuracy. The battle was fast and brutal. The Alliance troops were well trained, but they were unprepared for the human forces who fought with the fury of survival in their hearts. Bonner led the charge on the ground, moving swiftly through the wreckage of the convoy, taking out enemy soldiers with efficient, deadly precision. He felt the heat of the battle in his chest, the adrenaline surging as he pushed forward, refusing to stop. "We've got this," Parrish shouted over the comms, her voice filled with the same fierce determination. "We're breaking through their lines." But even as the battle raged on, Bonner knew that this was just the beginning. The Alliance wouldn't go down easily. They had far more ships, more soldiers, more firepower, and every minute they spent fighting was a minute the enemy had to regroup and retaliate. "Get ready for Phase 2, Bonner ordered. "We're taking out their command center." The team quickly moved toward their next objective, a heavily fortified facility where the Alliance coordinated their attacks. It was located deep in the heart of an enemy-controlled city, and it was heavily guarded. But Bonner's team had one advantage. They knew the Alliance's tactics inside and out. They knew how to strike fast, and they knew how to disappear before the enemy could respond. As they approached the city, Bonner's heart raced. This wasn't just a mission to destroy an enemy base. This was a mission to prove that humanity could stand against the might of the galaxy's most powerful empire. This was about more than survival. It was about sending a message. The team split up, moving in silence through the darkened streets. The city was eerily quiet, the only sound the distant hum of alien machinery. The team made their way toward the central command building, their weapons drawn and ready. Every shadow felt like a threat, every corner a potential ambush. They knew the enemy was watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Bonner's instincts were sharp. As they neared the command center, he could feel the tension in the air. The ground beneath their feet vibrated with the sound of approaching alien soldiers. They were close. They had to move quickly. Now, Bonner shouted, and the team burst into action. The Volturians charged forward, their weapons firing in a deadly storm. The Calorins slipped silently into the shadows, cutting down any enemies they encountered. Bonner led the charge inside the building, his pulse pounding in his ears. The command center was a maze of corridors and hallways, each one filled with enemy soldiers. But Bonner and his team had no time to waste. They fought their way through the building, taking out the guards with brutal efficiency. Every step forward felt like a victory. Every soldier they took down another blow to the Alliance's grip on the galaxy. But as they reached the heart of the command center, they encountered a new challenge. The enemy had deployed an advanced AI, similar to Zephyr, to protect their most vital systems. It was a massive machine, towering over them as it activated its weapons systems. The team froze for a moment, their eyes locked on the threat. "This isn't good," Niles muttered, his voice tense. "That AI is going to tear us apart." Bonner's mind raced. They had no choice but to face the AI head-on. It was powerful, but they had one advantage the Alliance couldn't account for: their unity. "Focus fire on its weak points," Bonner ordered. "We've trained for this. We can do it." The battle with the AI was fierce. It unleashed blasts of energy that sent the team scrambling for cover, but Bonner and his soldiers fought with everything they had. The Volturians' advanced weapons cut through the AI's defenses, while the Calorin flanked it from the shadows. Bonner's heart pounded in his chest as he charged forward, firing his weapon at the AI's weak points. The AI's systems flickered, its massive form jerking as the team's coordinated attack began to take effect. With one final powerful shot, the AI collapsed, its systems fried beyond repair. The command center was theirs. But even as they celebrated the victory, Bonner knew it wasn't over. The Alliance was still out there, and they would fight to the bitter end. But they had sent a clear message: humanity would never surrender. They would fight, and they would win. As Bonner and his team gathered their wounded and prepared for the next wave, he looked out at the horizon. The battle for humanity was far from over, but they had taken the first steps toward reclaiming their future. The air was thick with smoke. The battle had raged on for days, and now the world was beginning to feel the weight of their choices. Victory was close, but it came at a high cost. Bonner stood among the wreckage of the last fight, his face smeared with dirt and sweat. His clothes were torn, and his hands were covered in blood. Blood from enemies, but also from his comrades. The war had taken everything. The Galactic Alliance was crumbling. Their ships were disabled, their bases destroyed, their forces scattered. It was clear that the humans and their allies had gained the upper hand, but the victory felt hollow, like a distant dream that was fading before they could fully grasp it. "Bonner, we've done it," Perez said, her voice quiet, almost as if she was trying to make sense of it all. "The Alliance is broken. They're retreating. We've won." Bonner turned to her, but there was no joy in his eyes. He couldn't smile, not after everything that had happened, not after losing so many good people. "We've won, but at what cost?" Bonner asked, his voice strained. His thoughts turned to the faces of the soldiers they had lost, the Volturians who had given their lives, the Calrin who had fought with unmatched bravery, the humans who had stood firm against the invaders. The price of this victory was written in the names of the fallen. Perez's expression softened. She understood. She had seen it too. The bodies of comrades, the quiet moments of grief, the loss that couldn't be erased by a single victory. She reached out and placed a hand on Bonner's shoulder, a silent gesture of support. They had both seen enough battle to know that victory wasn't always a clean cut. Sometimes it was a scar that stayed with you for the rest of your life. "We did everything we could," Perez said. "We gave it our all. But it's okay to feel the weight of it. We lost a lot of good people." Bonner looked around at the aftermath. The wreckage of Alliance ships littered the ground, smoke rising from the craters where their weapons had once landed. There was a moment of silence as the final enemy forces retreated. The sky above Earth was clearing, but it wasn't a perfect blue. It was marred by the remnants of war, ash falling like rain, leaving a bitter taste in his mouth. "We did," Bonner replied softly, his voice distant. "But we also saved a lot of lives. Maybe that's enough." As he spoke, Niles came up beside him, his face tired but determined. "We've got a chance to rebuild, Bonner," he said, looking out at the horizon. "The Alliance is gone. We've made sure of that. Now we need to focus on the future." Bonner's gaze shifted to Niles. The young man had always been the optimist, the one who believed in the good that could come from all this destruction. Maybe that's what they needed now, a vision for the future. Because if they didn't focus on what came next, they would be stuck in the past forever. "You're right," Bonner said, his voice growing more resolute. "We can't let the past define us. We've won the battle, but now we have to rebuild. Earth needs us. The galaxy needs us. There's so much to do." But even as he spoke those words, he felt a gnawing emptiness. Rebuilding wouldn't be easy. It would take years, maybe decades. The damage was too great, the losses too deep. They had all sacrificed so much to get to this point, and the toll it had taken on them was undeniable. Bonner couldn't help but think of the soldiers they had lost, those who had never made it back. The faces of his fallen friends haunted him, their laughter and camaraderie now memories that would never fade. Bonner's eyes found the empty space beside him, where his closest friends should have been standing. There was nothing left but the bitter silence of their absence. "Bonner," Perez's voice broke through his thoughts. "We need to check in with the surviving leaders. They're waiting for us." Bonner nodded, pushing aside his grief for the moment. There was no time to dwell on what had been lost. The future was waiting, and there were still too many decisions to make. The team gathered in the command center once again. The Voltorians, the Calrin, and the humans. Together, they formed the first steps toward a new world. Bonner stood at the front, addressing the leaders of each faction, his voice steady despite the exhaustion weighing down on him. "We've won a hard-fought victory," Bonner said, his eyes scanning the room. "But it's not over. The galaxy is fractured. The Alliance is gone, but there's still a lot of rebuilding to do. We need to unite, to create something better out of the destruction we've caused. The future is in our hands." Captain Rylor of the Voltorians stepped forward, his expression grim but resolute. "We'll help you rebuild, but it's going to take time. There's a lot of distrust between the factions. We need to work together, but we can't rush it." Kara, the leader of the Calrin, nodded in agreement. "Trust takes time, but it can be built. We've seen the strength of humanity. You've earned our respect. Now we need to focus on healing the wounds we've all suffered." Bonner listened to the leaders, their words filling him with a sense of hope. The road ahead would be long, but there was a chance, a real chance, that they could build something better. The price of victory was high, but the future was still within their grasp. As the meeting ended, Bonner stepped outside to get some fresh air. The skies above Earth were no longer filled with the smoke of battle. They were clearing, the first hint of dawn breaking through the clouds. It was a new beginning. But even as Bonner looked toward the future, he knew that there would be no forgetting the cost of their victory. The faces of the fallen soldiers, the broken cities, the families left behind. All of it would stay with him. The weight of it would never truly leave. He looked out at the horizon, a quiet resolve settling in his heart. The battle had been won, but the real work was just beginning. They had the power to shape the future, to rebuild from the ashes, but it would come at a cost, one that they would carry with them for the rest of their lives. Victory had a price, and that price was something they would have to pay every day as they worked to build a better world. The days after the battle felt like a blur. Earth had been left in ruins, but there was an undeniable sense of hope in the air. After everything they had been through, after all the sacrifices, they were finally on the brink of rebuilding. The war had taken its toll, but it had also united the galaxy in a way nothing else could. Bonner stood on a hill overlooking the city. It was a place he'd often visited before the war, a quiet spot where he used to come to think. The landscape now looked different. Where once there had been bustling streets and towering skyscrapers, there were only ruins. Yet, amid the rubble, new life was beginning to emerge. A handful of survivors from different races were working together, clearing debris, and laying the foundations for something better. There were no more borders, no more lines drawn between humans, Volturians, or Caloran. They were all in this together now. The first steps toward peace were always the hardest. But Bonner had seen something in the survivors. Their resolve, their unity, their determination. It was the same thing that had fueled their victory in the war, and it was going to carry them through the rebuilding process. The scars of battle were deep, but the strength of the people was even deeper. As Bonner watched the workers, he heard a familiar voice behind him. "We're making progress," Perez said, her tone calm but full of determination. "It's slow, but it's happening." Bonner turned and nodded. Perez was right. It was slow. But the work they had ahead of them wasn't about rushing. It was about creating something lasting. And that was what they were doing. They were laying down the foundation for a new world, a world where they would never be divided again. "We have to keep moving forward," Bonner said, his voice thoughtful. "The past is gone. What matters now is what we build from here." Perez placed a hand on his shoulder, her expression thoughtful. "You've been carrying this weight for a long time, Bonner, but you don't have to do it alone. We're all in this together." Bonner glanced at the sky. It was still early, the sun just beginning to rise over the horizon. The first light of a new day. It felt like a symbol of everything they had fought for. The hope that the future would be brighter than the past. "I know," Bonner replied, "but I still think about all the people we lost. All the friends, the soldiers. Their faces are still with me." Perez gave him a reassuring smile. "We can't bring them back, but we can honor them. We can make sure that their sacrifices weren't in vain, and we can make sure that their memory lives on in the new world we're building." Bonner nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for his comrades. Perez was right. Their fallen friends would never be forgotten. They would live on in the future, in the lives that were yet to be lived, in the peace that was yet to come. They walked together down the hill, heading back toward the settlement where the leaders of the various factions were meeting. There was much to discuss. The Cal-Rin Volturians and humans had all come together to form a new government, one that would ensure that the galaxy would never again fall under the rule of a single oppressive power. As they entered the meeting room, the leaders were already gathered, waiting for them. Ryler, the Volturian captain, greeted them with a nod. "We're ready to move forward," he said, "but we need to lay down some rules. We need to ensure that the peace we're fighting for is real. We don't want to repeat the mistakes of the past." Kara, the leader of the Caloran, spoke next. "The key to lasting peace is trust. We've seen what happens when distrust and fear rule. It leads to war. But we've also seen what happens when we work together, when we put aside our differences for the greater good. This is the way forward." Bonner stood at the front of the room, looking at each of the leaders in turn. "We have to make sure that everyone's voice is heard. No one can be left out. Every race, every people, every individual matters. We are stronger when we are united, and we will face any challenge that comes our way." The leaders nodded, and a sense of agreement filled the room. It wasn't going to be easy, but they were committed to the task ahead. They were committed to ensuring that humanity and the other races of the galaxy would never again face the horrors they had just survived. The rest of the meeting focused on the logistics of rebuilding. The resources were limited, but they were determined to make it work. They talked about setting up trade routes, building infrastructure, and creating a council to oversee the rebuilding process. There was much to be done, but they all knew that the hardest part was behind them. As the meeting came to a close, Bonner stood up. "This is just the beginning. We've won the battle, but now we have to win the peace. We have to make sure that the sacrifices we've made were not in vain." The leaders nodded, and Bonner felt a sense of pride wash over him. They had been through hell, but they had come out the other side stronger. They had faced their darkest hour and emerged victorious. And now, they were going to build a future that would honor the fallen and ensure that no one would ever suffer the way they had. Later that day, Bonner found himself standing at the site of the memorial that had been erected in honor of the fallen soldiers. It was a simple monument, just a series of engraved plaques with the names of those who had given their lives for the cause. But as Bonner stood there, staring at the names, he realized that their memory would never fade. "They'll never be forgotten," Paris said, standing beside him. "Their sacrifice will be the foundation of everything we build from here." Bonner smiled softly, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. It had been a long and hard journey, but they had made it. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, Bonner felt hopeful. They had fought for this moment, and now they would make the most of it. The sun set that evening, painting the sky with brilliant shades of orange and purple. The world was healing, slowly but surely, and in that quiet moment, Bonner knew that the fight had been worth it. They had made it through the darkness. Now, a new dawn had arrived. They had won the battle for humanity. And now, they would build a future where peace and unity would reign.